Hello and welcome to MTG Reads. I'm DP, author, MTG fan and voracious reader, here to guide you to some of the very best in the written word on Magic the Gathering. And what a week it has been. According to the internet, if you were to draw back your curtains, throw open the windows and look outside, what you should see is Zendikar. Because looking at the internet, Zendikar is everywhere. 177 articles this week on Magic the Gathering, and most of them had a link of some sort to the latest announcements from Wizards. Now, it was a really packed announcement. There was the Zendikar reveal that everybody was expecting, but there was also announcements of pretty much all of the main releases for the next year, announcements about Arena coming to mobile, and much more besides. But it was the Zendikar release that was the inspiration for many writers, and that ranged from things like previews, such as the one written by Peter Day over at TCG Player. Now, this is one of the better previews of the release, because what Peter does is he marshals the cards into them being Dungeons & Dragons players. Now, it's a very funny and amusing article that goes through what the different cards do. He shows the cards but explains how they would fit into some scenario and just how you can really upset your Dungeon Master. It's a fun and amusing little way of doing a preview, certainly out of the ordinary, and being quite a short article, only took less than 5 minutes to read. Well worth your time, highly recommended as one of the better previews of this season. Taking a more analytical review of the Zendikar previews though was Jim Davis at Cool Stuff. What Jim's done is Jim's taken a look at the new mechanic, the modal double face cards, the MDF, that Wizards has introduced with the new Zendikar release. Now, it is a newer mechanic and it has got plenty of exciting possibilities, which Jim takes a look at and explores in a little bit of detail, and he examines just which decks and where and when they could benefit from these cards. I'm sure a little bit more will come out as we see a few more of them during the preview season, but certainly what Jim has done is a very good initial take. Wizards also announced the party mechanic as part of the Zendikar release. And Matias Arvigo over at MTG Arena Zone looks at this fairly critically. The mechanic rewards you for having certain subclasses of creatures on the battlefield at any given time, as they make up your party in the sense of Dungeons & Dragons. And for that reason, it's limited to warriors, wizards, rogues and clerics. Matias takes a look at that and its impact on the constructed formats that are played on Arena. He's very careful to point out some of the deck building traps that players could fall into, and he also gives some very good enabler cards explaining how they can fit in and support that mechanic with the cards that have been spoiled so far. One of those creature subtypes, the cleric, has very much got an appeal to Eric Levine over at Channel Fireball. And he takes one of the newly announced cards, Orah, Skyclave, Hierophant, and makes that a commander of a new cleric deck that he builds. Now, Eric makes some very good decks, designs very good decks, and it's well worth taking a look at the deck, which in itself is quite strong within the bounds of what clerics can do. But it's also a very good point he makes at the end about the fact that spoiler season isn't yet over, and there are more cards to come. Now, in my book, I talk about tuning up decks and why you would do it, and one of the reasons you tune up a commander deck is very much because new cards are coming. What Eric's done here is given us a very short, condensed exercise in looking at the cards that are going to be revealed for the rest of the Zendikar spoiler season and seeing how those can fit in and improve the deck that he's built. What cards do we drop from his deck in order to make it better? The article itself is interesting and the exercise even more so, and I highly recommend it to you. But the big story of the week is the story itself and its return back to the web articles. Wizards of the Coast is back to publishing it. Now, let's be honest, it's been a rough year ever since the War of the Spark novels came out and rather clumsily handled the end of what was best part of a decade's story arc. And people have been crying out for web articles ever since. Well, now Wizards is back. It's going to be doing 2 stories a week. That is one that is an episode of the story and one a side story as well. And so this week we have seen a scene setter that came out by Zirulnik and James Wyatt. That was followed up by episode 1 of the main story by Greenblatt. And then Miguel Lopez did a standalone side story, which frankly could have been episode 2, called Redroot. Now, if we look at these stories, one thing I've got to point out is that the episode 1 and the side story both happen before the cinematic trailer that Wizards previewed on the 1st of September. And so if you've already seen it, note that this is a prequel. If you haven't seen it, it's probably worth holding off till you've read both of these stories. Now, in episode 1, it's a relationship between Nissa and Nahiri, and they're going on a hunt for something ahead of going off to the events of the cinematic trailer. It's good to see that the relationship between Nissa and Chandra is acknowledged, that we see that Nissa's character is developing, because she was, frankly, in my view, one of the more boring of the Planeswalkers. And it sets the scene very much for the rest of the story with what is undoubtedly a very clear cliffhanger, twist and reveal right at the end of a key plot point. Meanwhile, Redroot by Miguel Lopez, that's all about Akira and Zareth and what they're doing before the trailer. So for those of you who don't know, the trailer features Nahiri, Akira and Zareth. So this tells the tale of Akira and Zareth. It's looking at them as very much mentally battle-scarred survivors of the fall of the Seagate, and it takes a look at a short adventure they take and how they reinforce their bonds after a time apart. Now, both of these stories are back to what we really wanted of the online web articles, where they seem to have a good understanding of the characters and are developing it quite nicely. It remains to be seen what happens over the coming weeks, but certainly it is great to see a week where there were over 13,000 words of story released, and I'm sure we've got many more. So as usual, all the links are in the text description down below. If you like what you've seen, please give a thumbs up and like the video. If you want to get notifications of new articles as they come out, please hit the subscribe and notify button. And until we meet again, happy reading and take care.